always on the dark side, always shooting towards the sun. The subject is always between the sun and myself. Camera, subject, sun. Hey everyone, my name is Julien and welcome to the Adorama Cinema channel. If you don't know me, I'm a director and DP and a photographer based on the East Coast. The goal of today's video is to teach you how to master natural light. I've built my career on shooting fast-paced documentaries, and I'm super excited about this episode. After mastering the concepts I'm about to show you, you're gonna instantly be a few levels up, and whether you take them into your natural light shooting and even under artificial light, those concepts are still going to be true, and they're gonna ensure your stuff looks excellent. I'm gonna boil this down into two simple categories: blocking, aka positioning, and ratios. So you've got blocking, which is the position of everything, your subject, where they're facing, your camera, where that's facing, background elements, the light, of course, whether that's the sun or a window. And you've got ratios. Is the background too dark or too bright? Or is the relationship between your subject's face and background elements not quite dialed in? Mastering all of these variables and knowing how they interact with one another in a matter of seconds is mastering natural light. Let's dive in. So here I have a bunch of random frames that I've pulled together, and I've drawn out where the light is coming from, where I have the camera placed, and where I have the subject placed, and which position everything is facing. We have the camera here represented in this red arrow, pointed at the subject, represented in this blue circle. Sometimes there will be a line coming out of it, which represents the way in which they're facing, and then the natural light source. So from a blocking perspective, the subject is in between the light source and the camera. I'm shooting on the dark side of the face, and what that's doing is that's creating this beautiful rim that you can see on this gentleman's skin and here in the hair. And some of this paper is actually pushing up a little bit of light just to kind of be caught right there on his eye. The number one rule and reoccurring theme that you're gonna see in these examples, our subject is sandwiched in between the sun and the camera. The camera is always pointing in the direction of the sun or close to it. It doesn't necessarily have to be directly pointing towards the sun. That would be directly backlit, which we'll get into. But in this case, it's slightly side lit, but we are still absolutely always shooting on what's called the dark side of the face. And we want the light to wrap over either the side or the top / side of any of your subjects. Let's take a moment to now discuss other elements in the image and also the ratios. This tarp and this beam of metal here and the grass and the sun, they all come together to create this composition that I personally really love. Always think about other elements of the frame, not just your subject. Now, when it comes to ratios, this is a well-balanced image from a lighting perspective. If this sky was any brighter or clipping, and if this side of her face was any darker or clipping, I would say that the ratios are not that good. The ratios here, I would say, are slightly better. The sky is toned down a bit, so it's farther away from clipping than it was. There's still contrast as her jacket is black and her skin is just beautifully saturated and exposed. And then this sky is just really interesting. We're not going too far in either direction. I don't mind the black jacket, so the ratios here are good. I'm a little bit closer to the light than we've seen in previous examples, and what you're getting here as a result of that is this beautiful wrap on her face with a little bit of light right here on her cheek. So this is an example of pretty much direct backlight. When you do stuff like this, it is absolutely the most extreme situation and scenario. So subject is directly sandwiched between camera and sun. And when this works, and you keep your ratios, you hold your ratios. As you can see, they're harder to keep. The sky is starting to blow out. Some of this stuff is dark. When you get it right, It's extreme and it's beautiful, and there's hard contrast. You can also see there's a lens flare here. That's what can also happen when you point directly at the sun. It's really just going to be a situation for you to just do some trial and error. Now let's move on to window light. So basically, same concepts exist, and windows generally soften the light. So that's a good thing. And I've added this white line here to represent the window. You can see there's some hard light coming in here, but not quite on the face. Dark side here looks absolutely beautiful. Rim lights, beautiful light on the face. From a ratios perspective, this is way more blown out than I would like, but it's just one of those times where I'm gonna sacrifice that and I'm really focused just on the overall scene. This is a good example of sort of ratios and patterns. You've got this dark column here. We've got a window that is not blowing out enough to be distracting. It's pouring beautiful natural window light onto our subject. And then we have some dark elements here. Again, where's my camera facing? My camera's facing towards the window, and the subject is in between the window and I. Same thing here, just like I said. Now, depending on what's going on behind me, the dark side of their face might be darker or lighter, and that would be called fill or negative fill. And so if you were to push something dark, or if you had a dark wall here, it would darken up this side of their face. And if you pushed something white or a reflector or even a white wall here, there would be some more fill. And I can tell just now, not only do we have this beautiful wrap on his face from the window, but his dark side of the face is a little bit more filled than some of these other examples. And that must be because either the architecture plans that he's looking at or a wall behind him is filling in some of that shadow side. Now we'll go on to some silhouettes, directly sandwiching the subject between the sun and the camera. And this is where you're going to have some of the most extreme, contrasty, powerful images, but you're going to have to do it carefully in order to keep your ratios in check. So my ratios are just in check here because the sky is not blown out. You get this beautiful, almost film burn where the mountain meets the sky. I love this image, and I love silhouettes in general, especially when they're done well. Again, silhouette, making sure to hold the highlights here and not burn them out. And from a ratios perspective, yeah, there's absolutely nothing in the blacks, and the blacks are crushed, but what a powerful image. This is a great example and reminder. If you don't know what to do, just get on the dark side. All right, so I've put this little sequence in here just to show you how I move through some B-roll coverage. I'm here shooting towards the light. You get this beautiful golden color lighting up the honey. You get a beautiful rim on all these tops and his hand, and you get to see some lens flare. Now, from a ratios perspective, full-on backlight is fun and good, and it looks good, and it's extreme with a lot of contrast, but you can get close to breaking your dynamic range and your ratios. If this was just all white sky, I probably wouldn't have pressed the record button, but since we have this stuff breaking up the background, I felt like it was holding just fine. I got a lot of coverage this day, but I got this image in particular, knowing perfectly well that this background it's definitely blowing out. It's hotter than I'd want it to be. It's not my favorite frame in the world, but I put it in the documentary and it told the story. And the same thing goes for this frame. This is a really good example of flat lighting. So the lighting coming from the front of his tent is lighting his face. As you can see, I'm on the same side of that light, and there's not necessarily this beautifully strong dark side of his face, it's just flat. I've just had to keep this in here. It tells the story well, and that's okay sometimes. The story is more important than the perfect frame. So continuing on the theme of flat lighting, not necessarily the perfect, most epic lighting in the world, this was a really cloudy and actually rainy day. And it is definitely interesting that I'm up here on the bucket of this tractor, but from a lighting perspective, the lighting is just sort of the same everywhere you look. And again, sometimes that's okay. You have to do what you do. On a day like this, when it's cloudy, you really can do whatever you want. I would just encourage you that if you can find things that will create shadow, this tree to try and create shadow on his face, or maybe a dark building. Here's an example of not shooting on the dark side of the face. It's much less contrasty, it's a flatter image, it's less dynamic, but it does work and it certainly tells the story. These farmers and even this dog over here are herding these turkeys who got out of their pen. It was happening in front of me and I had to just shoot it. But I really enjoyed this composition of the two with the turkeys and then the enclosure in the back. And so this looks good because it's late in the day. The shadows are long. The sun is really beautiful and warm, but it's certainly flatter and there's less shape. This is definitely like one of the safest things to do. Backlit, pointed towards the sun, subjects in between. The hats and the subjects are absolutely backlit and there's rims everywhere, and that's beautiful, but their faces are quite flat. There isn't much wrap, and if the ground is green or brown or whatever, that color might be reflecting back onto them. But when in doubt, just backlight them and go from there. Now we're going to go out and shoot and try to apply what we've learned here into some real-world, fast-paced examples. Whether you're shooting a documentary or maybe like a patient story type of thing, there's always a person, potentially, reading a book or writing in a journal. Like a client would normally say, or a director, hey, why don't you sit on the couch and we'll shoot you? Looks okay. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's not the formula that I've been teaching you. So Kelly, why don't you come sit over here? And I'll move this out of the way so I have some room. And so I immediately see an edge light, a beautiful backlight here on her hair and on the side of her face. And I could start shooting this and it's immediately going to look better than that. But I actually need to move you a little bit more. So why don't you stand up for me for a second? And I'm going to put you here. Let's see what that looks like. And as you can see immediately, that rim light on her arm is beautiful. The lens is flaring a little bit. There's edge light on the book, edge light on her arm there. And as we come up to the face, there's edge light there. As far as ratios are concerned, the background is interesting, nothing's blown out. Kelly, what happens if you barely turn your face towards the light a little bit? Now that is what's called the Rembrandt light, just enough to get the sun on the dark side of the face cheek. So on this final example, Kelly and I are outside and she's on the yoga mat. And we're out here in some late day, beautiful, pretty strong sunlight. And so I've got her positioned so if she's looking straight forward, the sun is about at a not quite 45, almost 90-ish, 60-ish degree direction from her. And so she's just getting a little bit of light on this far cheek. The sky is pretty bright, so the ratios are a bit harsh. And here you can really see the edge light and how it wraps around the arm there. The image is great, especially when I start to wrap this way. Thanks so much for watching. Like I said earlier, natural light shooting is something that I love, and I was really excited to share this with you today. I hope you learned something, and if you like content like this and you're not already subscribed to the Adorama Cinema channel, go ahead and do that now. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below, and I'll get right to every single one of them. Well, until next time, I'll see you out there, have some fun, and go shoot.